Next, they are part of our daily lives, but for how much longer? Jane Dodge investigates what the future holds for our regional daily papers.
And now the presses roar into action. The rush and bustle of producing millions of newspapers is on again.
Those were the days everyone, it seemed, had their nose in a newspaper.
Can't they get those papers out quicker?
Sales now are tiny in comparison. Many advertisers have gone elsewhere and thousands of jobs have been lost.
Is this something going forward?
This reporter and her photographer are a sign of the times. They work for an online newspaper, the Lincolnite. It competes with the Lincolnshire Echo, which after more than a century as a daily newspaper has become a weekly. The changes have come at a cost, according to the leader of the City Council.
We had more specialism, more in-depth knowledge, more political nous, if you like, among journalists. I'm not saying that's entirely lacking among the present cadre, but it's less evident, and we've got to work harder to make sure that people understand the context of decision-making and what we're up to.
In the days when newsrooms were dominated by men with moustaches, papers like the Leicester Mercury were selling 200,000 copies a day. It now sells around a quarter of that. The Derby Telegraph has seen its circulation plummet to just under 31,000. But sales of the Nottingham Post have fallen by 17% in the last year, making it the worst performing regional newspaper in the country. Later this month, the Post is due to move to smaller offices. It's also got a new editor who's already overseen the switch from a daily to a weekly on his last paper, the Scunthorpe Telegraph.
So is the Nottingham Post also set to become a weekly or disappear altogether? Not according to its new editor, Mel Cook. He says the paper constantly leads with stories that other media follow. It's number one in the community for news and information, and it will remain that way.
So the Nottingham Post will stay a daily, and it's already made an operating profit of £965,000 this year, up on 2011. But according to the National Union of Journalists, its owner has shown no commitment to the long-term survival of its regional newspapers.
I believe there has to be a completely different look at the ownership structure of the media, and there's nothing this government has done so far that suggests that they are willing to look at that.
We approached the editors of the 3 local daily papers, but they declined to be interviewed. At a recent debate in Westminster, a local MP called for government subsidies to keep provincial newspapers afloat.
If, after all, the BBC is supported on taxpayer-funded subsidies and council free sheets are supported at ratepayers' expense and local television stations are indirectly supported by compulsion for the BBC to buy their content, why should local newspapers possess none of these advantages when they offer an irreplaceable function?
Any such action would have to be swift. More than a dozen jobs have gone at the Leicester Mercury and the Nottingham Post already this year. And only this week, another 10 staff at the Derby Telegraph have been told their jobs are now at risk.
So, Chris, do you fear for the future of our local dailies when you see how circulation's plummeting?
I think we're seeing this as a phenomenon that's apparent right across the country. The advent of the internet, social media. I think the economic downturn that we're currently experiencing is also contributing because there are less businesses willing to expend money on advertising in the local newspaper.
And what impact do you think the cuts have had already in editorial staff, for example?
Oh, it's had a huge impact. I know in my own constituency, which is served by the Derby Telegraph, there's been a huge reduction in the number of staff, and that obviously has a knock-on implication, I think, for the reporting of democracy. I mean, many years ago when I was a local council, when I was first elected over 20 years ago, the coverage of our local democracy was,
you knew what was going on.
A significant feature of what the local paper covered,
Sure. Well, Issan, do you think local papers are facing overwhelming pressure from things like new media, or are they just being too defeatist?
No, I think what Chris is saying is absolutely right, and it's not just a UK phenomenon, it's a worldwide phenomenon. There was a recent report which spoke about the demise of print press within the OECD countries, and actually the demise in the UK has been the fastest of all the OECD countries, and it's all to do with the media. It's to do with some of it to do with the recession, but most importantly, it's got to be, and I actually think there is some scope to look at subsidies for the media, and we need to.
So is Louise Medge right then?
Well, no, I think there is room to explore it. I think I'm not saying she's right. I think there's room to explore it, but I think what we need to do at the same time is to link some of that with ways in which the newspapers behave.
Okay.
So, for example, continuation of the democratic function of news delivery in the community cohesion, social value.
Okay.
These sorts of things could be linked to subsidies.
Would you support subsidies?
I'm not sure subsidies for the newspaper industry is the right way to go, I have to say. Particularly at a time when we're seeing massive reductions in public services. If we're going to prioritise public spending, to put money into a local private organisation effectively would not, in my view, be the right way of using that money. It'd be far better to put it into investing in regeneration and creating jobs in that regard. And I think support needs to be given wherever possible, however, to the newspaper industry.
Is part of the problem, though, that is it acceptable, for example, for Northcliffe to own so many papers in our area?
Well, that may be part of the issue.
So we need to be looking at that too.
Well, and the way in which the news is made available over the internet. I mean, because a lot of people don't buy the paper now because they can read it online for free.
Well, that's their choice, though, isn't it?
It is, but then that's a factor, isn't it? I mean, some newspapers are experimenting with giving the introduction, and then if people want further information or the rest of the story, they could pay a subscription.
I think what we need to be pushing towards is a more pluralistic offering. So that ensures that we continue to have print press, but we also continue to support the internet and the way in which the news is circulated through the internet. Let's not forget that information is one aspect of poverty reduction.
Okay.
So we must make sure that we continue with print press.
We must leave it there. Time now for our roundup of some of the other stories in the East Midlands in 60 seconds with our political editor, John Hess.